Yad A Shea Nas Bahilian and Shapping Batoning and Schlunch at the Rahibashish Chin Ashihan Dasha Cheshana Dashanella, Oneida, Wisconsin, Nasha. Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Nazba Hill. I come from the Navajo and Oneida Nations, and I currently reside in Oneida, Wisconsin with my husband and two children. I am Deer Spring Water Clan, born for the Turtle Clan. My maternal grandpa's clan was Salt, and my paternal grandpa's clan was Bear Clan. I currently serve as a senior consultant and tribal technical assistant and engagement lead for a company called Advocates for Human Potential. And my presentation topic is about Charlie Hill and how he reclaimed the narrative through humor. I want to first start by saying thank you to Dr. Dan for including my work as part of the Indigenous Pedagogy Academy. So, Ahiat and Yanko. So very quickly, a little bit about myself. Last year, I defended my dissertation and became Dr. Hill. I wrote my dissertation about my father. Charlie Hill was the first stand-up comedian in U.S. history. My dissertation was the first of its kind, and I wrote about the impact of his legacy. It was a way for me to promote and preserve his legacy and also create an educational resource for academia to use. So a little background here. Charlie was an Oneida comedian, the first Native American stand-up comedian in U.S. history who made a remarkable contribution to mainstream comedy. He was the first Native comedian to ever appear on national television shows such as The Richard Pryor Show, The Late Show with Letterman, and The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and boldly address controversial topics about Native people. At about age 10, Charlie moved from Detroit to the Oneida Reservation in Wisconsin, where his dream of becoming a comedian just flourished. He was supported by families and mentors, tribal leaders, and the strong women of Oneida. And so he recognized his calling early on. His father was a tribal leader in the Oneida community, and his grandma was the second female Indian doctor in history. These were the type of mentors that he had around him that helped him realize he would support Native people on a much larger scale. And as his comedy career took shape, he committed to using his platform to raise awareness of Native issues, inspiring activism and demonstrating the power of humor in achieving social justice. So for the next few slides, I will briefly go over some research I highlighted in my dissertation. One scholar said Charlie Hill is the most well-known Native American stand-up comedian that you've never heard of because his mainstream appearances on The Tonight Show and Richard Pryor's TV show, among many other mainstream appearances, they happened back in the 70s and 80s. And back then, these shows were actually very, very popular. To this day, Charlie Hill is the only Native American stand-up comic to have appeared on The Tonight Show, telling jokes from a Native point of view. He inspired a whole wave of other Native artists to enter the comedy realm. And there was a scholar who wrote that since Charlie Hill, there have been over 100 active Native American comedians who have entered the comedy arena. Vine Deloria Jr., one of the most prolific Indigenous writers in history, praised Charlie for his ability to bridge the gap between cultures and act as an intermediary for the Indian community. Charlie's humor conveyed aspects of Native experiences to white audiences, and he was really able to forge a connection with his audiences through his education about the misconceptions and stereotypes of Native people. I have some quotes here from a couple of different scholars that I found through my research. One scholar said that Charlie Hill's jokes and humor dispel preconceived stereotypes of American Indian people and reminded viewers that American Indians are human beings. Charlie used various strategies such as analogy, understatement, double entendres to disarm the audience and make Non-Indians laugh at their own blind spots and stereotypical assumptions. And finally, Cherokee novelist Thomas King says Charlie believes that by laughing about painful experiences from the past, he can turn poison into medicine. And that was one thing that he's always said in interviews, is that that was his goal. He wanted to use humor, and he wanted to use laughter as a way to create medicine for and healing for our people. Charlie's stand-up comedy routine addressed heavy topics such as racism, stereotypes, cultural appropriation, alcohol, and poverty. And I wanted to highlight some important statistics. Currently, Native people are still viewed stereotypically and as historical representations of the past, portraying Native people as stuck in the historical past serves to make them invisible today. And mass media really plays a substantial role in the way social groups understand themselves and are understood by others. Mass media plays a role in how Native people have been historically represented. In 2018, a research from the Reclaiming Native Truth Project looked at the dominant narratives in American society, particularly in the area of public perception, the media, the education system, and popular culture, and found that 87% of schools did not teach about Native people in past the year 1900. 78 of Americans said they know little to nothing about Native people. 40% of Americans believe that Native people did not exist. So this research is from 2018, which was only 7 years ago, and these are some of the stats that they found. Not shocking, right? So now let's move into talking a little bit about Indigenous story work. So Indigenous story work is a rich and multifaceted practice that goes far beyond simple entertainment. It's a fundamental way in which our Indigenous cultures transmit knowledge, values, history, and spiritual understanding across generations. And over time, Indigenous storytelling is primarily an oral tradition, meaning stories are passed down through spoken word. Charlie was a storyteller. He was also a spoken word artist. He was an educator. He was a researcher. He was an activist and a leader and a healer. In essence, Charlie Hill's comedy was a form of storytelling that challenged, educated, and entertained. He used humor to convey important messages about Indigenous identity, history, and culture, making him a significant figure in mainstream comedy. Charlie Hill's comedy was also deeply intertwined with Indigenous storytelling in several ways. So he used humor to dismantle harmful and inaccurate stereotypes about Native people that have been perpetuated for generations. In doing so, he was replacing false narratives with authentic ones. By presenting himself as a contemporary Native American with a sharp wit, he told a story that countered the outdated noble savage or the vanishing Indian. His comedy also incorporated elements of his Oneida heritage, often providing audiences with insights into Indigenous experiences and perspectives. He also wove stories about reservation life, historical injustices, and just the complexities of being a Native American in modern society. And I also look at his humor as a way, as like a tool for reclaiming historical narratives that have been distorted or ignored. He addressed issues like land rights and treaties and the legacy of colonization, using comedy to shed light on these important topics. I also think about how he was providing a voice. In a time when Native American representation in mainstream media was limited, back in the 70s and 80s when he was coming up, his comedy provided a powerful platform for Indigenous voices. And he used his platform to tell stories that resonated with a Native American audience and also to educate non-Native audiences about Indigenous realities. It's important to understand that humor is a long-standing tradition within Indigenous communities. Charlie was utilizing a long-standing cultural tool to transmit information. There's so many ways that Charlie's legacy can be used for educational purposes. So let's start with cultural studies and Native American history. When we think about challenging stereotypes, his comedy can be used to illustrate how stereotypes are formed and perpetuated in media. Analyzing his routines can also help students understand the impact of these stereotypes on our Native communities. His jokes also reference historical events and injustices, providing a unique perspective on Native American history. And his work can really spark discussions about treaties, land rights, and the ongoing effects of colonization. His comedy also offered insights into the realities of contemporary Native American life, including reservation life and the challenges of navigating mainstream society. For many of us, we have to learn to walk into two worlds, and there are challenges that come along with that. His appearances on mainstream television shows can be used to analyze how Native Americans have been represented in media over time. And today we have a lot more representation than we have in the past, but we still see those stereotypes. Students can also examine how he used his platform to challenge expectations and dominant narratives. His work demonstrates the power of comedy as a tool for social commentary and activism. Students can explore how humor can be used to raise awareness of social justices, social issues, and promote change. His comedy can also be used to raise awareness of issues facing Native American communities such as poverty, discrimination, and cultural preservation. His work can inspire students to become advocates for social justice. Just like he used comedy as his platform to advocate for social justice, students can be influenced to follow a similar path. So there are different ways to incorporate his work. You can show clips of his stand-up routines in classrooms, analyze his comedy techniques and messages, using his work as a starting point for discussions around Native American history and culture, comparing and contrasting his representation of Native Americans with other media portrayals, both past and present. A counter-narrative is essentially an alternative story that challenges a dominant or widely accepted narrative. And Charlie was really a master at using comedy to deliver counter-narratives. He presented himself as a contemporary, intelligent, and humorous individual, which subverted the savage or the vanishing Native American images that people had. Here he was on stage, this contemporary Native, person doing comedy. That's something that nobody has really ever heard of when he was on stage. They were used to seeing, how Hollywood portrayed people. The dominant narratives are the prevailing stories that often are repeated and reinforced by societal institutions, media, culture norms. They really can shape how we understand history, social issues, and even our own identities. And so the counter narrative, the reverse perspective, offers a different perspective, often from the viewpoint of marginalized or underrepresented groups. And really what it does is it aims to challenge the assumptions and biases embedded in the dominant narrative. It provides a more complete and deeper understanding of events or situations. It gives a voice to those whose stories have been ignored or silenced. And to provide counter narratives also provide an alternative viewpoint. A counter-narrative seeks to disrupt the established narrative and offer a new, often more critical interpretation. And so that was the strategy, one of the strategies that Charlie used in his jokes. He used what was called the counter-narrative. Charlie used humor to challenge, stereotypes. He offered the counter-narrative to the dominant images of Indigenous people in the United States. So here are some examples of his jokes that offer the counter narrative. My people are from Wisconsin. We used to be from New York. We had a little real estate problem. So this joke is alluding to the historical displacement of Native Americans from their ancestral lands, a topic that is often ignored or even glossed over in mainstream narratives. So another example of his joke is Columbus discovered America, they taught me when I was a kid. Columbus discovered Indians. How could he discover Indians when we were already here? That's like me going to the parking lot and discovering your Mercedes. That was always a favorite joke of mine. So this joke is really satirizing the traditional narrative of Christopher Columbus's discovery of America, highlighting the erasure of Indigenous peoples' presence and history. Here are some more examples. People come up to me and they say, "Can you speak Indian?" It's like saying, "Hey, can you speak Caucasian?" And this joke points out the absurdity of the assumption that there is this single Indian language, when in fact there are hundreds of distinct Indigenous languages. We used to call them whitebacks. They started to unload the boats, building houses. The first thing we asked, "You guys gonna stay tonight?" This joke is, it challenges the narrative of European settlers, portraying them instead as the immigrants who overstayed their welcome. Through his comedy, Charlie challenged stereotypes, reclaimed historical narratives, and asserted the presence and resilience of our Native communities. His jokes served as a powerful counter-narrative to the dominant narrative that often marginalized Native people. And his comedy was a form of cultural activism, using humor as a weapon against injustice and a tool for empowerment. He directly confronted the pervasive and the very damaging stereotypes that have plagued Native representation. He didn't shy away from addressing, the noble savage, the drunken Indian, or any other dehumanizing portrayals of Native people. And by exposing the absurdity of these stereotypes, he forced his audiences to reconsider their preconceived notions. He used humor to reframe historical events from a Native perspective, challenging all of these dominant narratives that often erase or distorted Indigenous experiences. And he provided context and insight into the ongoing effects of colonization, highlighting the resilience and strength of Native communities. His very presence on stage was a powerful statement of Native American presence in contemporary society. His jokes also celebrated the humor, the intelligence, and the cultural richness of Native communities, showcasing their abilities to thrive in the face of adversity. And he showed that modern Indigenous people exist and are not just a thing of the past. He gave voice to the experiences and perspectives of Native communities, challenging the power structures that sought to silence us. And he used his platform to educate and to cause people to reconsider their own biases. So Charlie's comedy can be a powerful educational tool for the youth, offering engaging and thought-provoking insights into Native history, culture, contemporary issues, and we give some examples of how his work can be used in educational settings. In a classroom discussion, you can show clips of Charlie Hill's stand-up routines and facilitate discussions about the stereotypes he challenged. Ask students to identify the stereotypes, analyze how Charlie challenged these stereotypes with humor, and discuss why these stereotypes are harmful. You can also use Charlie Hill's jokes as examples of how humor can be used to critique and challenge dominant narratives in the media. You can encourage students to critically analyze media portrayals of Native Americans and identify stereotypes. You can also pair Charlie Hill's jokes about historical events. I gave the example of two jokes about the displacement of Native Americans and Columbus's discovery with historical readings and primary sources. This can be a way that that helps students to understand the historical context of his jokes and gain a deeper understanding of Native history. You can also use Charlie's jokes, his comedy, as a starting point for exploring counter narratives to the traditional historical accounts. You can encourage students to research and share their stories and perspectives that are often left out of mainstream history. Charlie's comedy is rooted in oral tradition. So, exploring the importance of oral histories in Native American cultures by inviting elders or community members to share their stories or perspectives. You can also have students conduct their own oral history projects focusing on their experiences. You can use Charlie Hill's jokes about language, traditions, and cultural identity to spark conversations about the diversity of Native American culture, the importance of cultural preservation. You can encourage students to reflect on their own cultural identities and how humor plays a role in shaping their understanding of themselves and others. You can promote critical thinking. Ask students to analyze how Charlie Hill's humor how he used humor to make his points, discuss the different types of humor he employs. For example, satire, irony, observational humor, and how they contributed to the messages that he was sending through the jokes that he told. You can use Charlie Hill's jokes as a springboard for debates and discussions around contemporary issues facing Native communities, such as sovereignty, land rights, cultural appropriation, among other topics. You can use his humor to inspire creativity. Encourage students to write their own comedic pieces or create other forms of media, maybe cartoons or memes or comic books that challenge stereotypes and share their perspectives on Native issues. Organize a class comedy show where students can perform their own stand-up routines or share humorous stories that explore their cultural identities and experiences. And really, the examples that I gave, you can adapt them to, elementary, middle school, high school, even higher education, college level. You can really adapt any of these methods that I shared to any age group. So we think about reclaiming Indigenous knowledge. I think about honoring oral traditions and how Charlie's comedy is rooted in Indigenous oral traditions, which has been historically overvalued in academia. By incorporating his work into the curriculum, educators can help to reclaim and revitalize these traditions. Validating Indigenous experiences. His comedy validated the lived experiences of Indigenous people, which often has been dismissed or ignored in academic discourse. This helps to create an inclusive and equitable learning environment. By showcasing the power of Indigenous humor and storytelling, Charlie's work can contribute to the ongoing process of cultural revitalization. So we think about moving beyond text-based learning. Charlie's comedy offers a dynamic and engaging alternative to the traditional text-based learning by incorporating multimedia resources and diverse forms of expression. Educators can create a more inclusive and accessible learning environment. Charlie's work can also serve as a catalyst for critical dialogue and discussion. When you create a safe and respectful place for your students to share their thoughts, ideas, perspectives, educators can create collaborative and transformative learning experiences. Emphasize community engagement. You can do this by decolonizing education often. And it involves connecting with Indigenous communities and engaging in community-based learning. Invite Indigenous speakers, incorporate community perspectives into your curriculum. Educators can create a more relevant and meaningful learning experiences. And then using Charlie Hill's work within academia allows educators to move beyond simply teaching about Indigenous people and instead facilitates learning from Indigenous perspectives, therefore actively engaging in the decolonization of education. So here's my personal perspective. As Charlie Hill's daughter, it's my obligation and it's my privilege to share his work in a way that I think will help empower Native people, Native youth to the best of my ability. That's why I wrote my dissertation. I wanted to preserve and promote his legacy because I think it's just really, really important. And he has lessons within the work that he shared that can still be applied, that is still relevant today. And he didn't just tell jokes, he really ignited a movement. I think back, like when he was first up and coming, he was the only Native stand-up comedian in the 70s. And now there are over 100. That's really amazing. And whether they know about him or not, he opened that door. That was part of his legacy. He opened the door and he put Native people's issues on a map. And everybody, after him started to use the platform in a similar manner. Let's talk about Native issues. Let's bring awareness through humor. And so he really empowered us to challenge the narratives that have confined us and reclaim our own stories. His humor was a gift, a powerful tool for change. And so I say, let's honor that gift by sharing it with the world. I invite you to share his comedy and his humor with your children, your students, your community, in all ways that you can. Watch a video, look up a book, or look up his work, Google him online, and share this video as well. Let his laughter inspire and continue to heal. So I just want to say thank you so much for watching my presentation. Please feel free to contact me at nasba7@gmail.com for any inquiries or questions that you may have. And lastly, I want to leave you with some references. I know you can't click on the link in this video, but you can Google both the titles and you should be able to easily access any of the materials. So the first one is my dissertation, which is called An Examination of Charlie Hill's Legacy. It's published publicly on proquest.com. The second one is called The Examination of Charlie Hill's Legacy, which is a YouTube video. It's about 18 minutes long, and I created that as my project for my dissertation. So if you don't have time to read a 246 page plus dissertation, you can watch the YouTube video that I created and share that with your classrooms and your students. There's also a book called We Had a Little Real Estate Problem, the Unheralded Story of Native Americans and Comedy. And this book really highlighted Charlie's work, and he is almost like the main character of this book. And the title of the book, We Had a Little Real Estate Problem, was actually in honor of my father, and it is referring to a punchline in one of his very famous jokes. So check these resources out. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and thank you, and we will see you later.